In the aftermath of Donald Trump's second federal indictment by Jack Smith for Trump's attempts to steal the 2020 election from Joe Biden, the Fox Propaganda Network is bending over backwards, engaging in the most ridiculous, most convoluted of mental gymnastics to try to downplay or excuse Trump's actions. And there's so much ridiculousness coming from so many of the pundits and the commentators, but there was one recently that stood out to me just of how brazen it was, coming from somebody who's presumably a relatively straight news person instead of like Tucker Carlson or Jesse Waters. But before we unpack all of that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. So Julie Banderas is someone I haven't covered on this channel in over a year, right? I remember at the time of President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law being passed, like in the weeks afterwards, like a bridge collapsed somewhere, and she was throwing, I thought Biden was handling infrastructure. Like, apparently, in Julie Banderas' mind, when a law, a national law, is signed into law by the president of the United States, apparently its effects occur overnight, and so she just has a really bizarre sense of politics and legislative trajectory. But I haven't covered her since then. But I saw this on Twitter, and I listened to it, and I had to listen to it multiple times because it was just so bizarre. So this is her interviewing somebody about Donald Trump's legal woes, his increasing legal situation, the indictments from Jack Smith, the potential indictments coming from Fulton County, Georgia. But I want you to hear what she has to say, and then we will unpack it together. Okay, brace yourselves.
Case impartially is impossible. I mean, if you think about it, politics written all over it. Attorneys are supposed to represent the law, not politics, okay? Judges, same. Judges are the only ones that are able to recuse themselves, okay? So it's up to a judge to recuse themselves. If they've got...
You know what I find hilarious about that? So they're talking about like Judge Tanya Chutkan, the federal judge who will preside over Donald Trump's second federal indictment by Jack Smith. I imagine Julie Banderas wasn't saying anything like this about Eileen Cannon, the presiding judge of Donald Trump's first federal indictment by Jack Smith. And Cannon was a Trump appointee who bent over backwards to accommodate Trump in previous legal proceedings, and she was actually reprimanded harshly by a conservative appellate court for her incompetence and unfair accommodation of Trump. I imagine Julie Banderas had nothing to say about that, but it's only when a black Obama appointee happens to be presiding over a case with respect to Donald Trump, then the matter of judicial recusal and judicial bias, then that's important. And by the way, I'll also point out, I imagine Julie Banderas has nothing to say about the fact that Democrats in the Senate want to beef up recusal requirements for the Supreme Court, including liberal justices on the Supreme Court. I don't know why this clip continues to do this. It's really aggravating. I imagine she has had nothing to say in that respect. And yet here she is when it comes to the recusal of Judge Chutkan. Then that's a matter worth examining. Then recusal and recusal requirements are something worth considering. So she's a partisan hack, and she's a partisan hack in the worst possible way because she focuses on potential complications on the left while ignoring the much bigger actual complications on the right. That's the worst kind of hackery. But anyway, let's continue.
Impossible. I mean, if you think about it, politics written all over it. Attorneys are supposed to represent the law, not politics, okay? Judges, same. Judges are the only ones that are able to recuse themselves, okay? So it's up to a judge to recuse themselves. If they've got it in for one of their future cases, there's no way they're going to recuse themselves. So obviously the system is a little bit broken, I would have to say. Let's move over to Fulton County, Georgia.
Again, guarantee you she has no criticisms with respect to, when the system is broken in a way that favors Trump and Republicans and conservatives. Absolutely transparent.
Because in that district, they're potentially going to be coming forth with a fourth indictment. The attorney there, Fannie Willis, is probing whether Trump committed crimes in trying to overturn the election results in Georgia. Committing crimes. Okay, I want to talk about Trump's alleged crimes for a second. He hasn't been indicted with incitement. We know that, right? So it's not a crime to tell lies.
He's not been incited for indictment yet, therefore it's not a crime to tell lies. Nobody's saying that it is a crime to tell lies, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Being a narcissist isn't a crime. Hatching schemes to stay in office is not a crime.
That's the big one. We'll come to that in a second, too.
And claiming you won an election that you know you lost is not a crime. With all of that said, how do you see this playing out in Georgia?
So here's my frustration with Julie Banderas. No, it is not a crime to lie about an election. This was acknowledged by Jack Smith in the indictment, paragraph 3, and we discussed this in a previous video. The defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he'd won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results, and he did. Over 60 court cases, and he lost all but like one, okay? And this was in a variety of states, presided over by a variety of judges, including conservative Trump-appointed judges. He was laughed out of court. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. So Jack Smith goes out of his way to clarify, yeah, Trump did have the right to free speech. He even had the right to lie about the election. What he did not have the right to do is to break the law. So when she talks about, scheming to stay in office, that's not a crime. Well, it depends on how you do it, right? If the scheme is, hey, I'm going to try to challenge the results legally, if you count that as a scheme, then no, that's not illegal. It's disgusting in a way, like if you know you lost the election and you're just grasping at straws in order to stay in power, yeah, it might be legal, probably disgusting, but fair enough. But again, Jack Smith even points it out. He had the right to contest the election through legal and appropriate means. What Donald Trump did not have the right to do is scheme to stay in power in a way that, was commensurate with a criminal conspiracy. A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. Okay? Like the fake elector scheme, or trying to get the vice president to just throw out votes that you don't like. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified. Then a conspiracy against the right to vote and have one's vote counted in violation. Again, that's part and parcel of the fake elector scheme, right? It wasn't like the states in question decertified the results and selected themselves an alternate slate of electors. Donald Trump tried to dishonestly and corruptly and fraudulently just have random people declare themselves electors and get them to go to the Capitol, and Mike Pence basically recognized those fake false electors who were backing Trump instead. So Julie Banderas is just disgusting in this respect. I mean, by the way, also the tacit implication here, notice how she doesn't even go out of her way to condemn what he said. She's implicitly saying, hey, listen, Trump is a narcissist and a liar who schemed to stay in power. That's implicit to what she said. Donald Trump is all those things. But she completely glosses over that. Even if she had just said, by the way, that's disgusting and proof that the Republican Party should move beyond Donald Trump, if she'd thrown that in there, that might have been something. But instead, she just bends over backwards to downplay what this man did and pretend that none of it was criminal, when in fact, Jack Smith is making that case. Listen, if he had done these things legally, if he had just lied, that would again been an exercise of free speech. He has the right to lie. But that's not what he did. That's not what he's being charged or indicted for. And so Julie Banderas and other Fox News commentators are themselves lying about the indictment itself. And as Bill Barr, Trump's own conservative attorney general, said, you have a right to lie, but you do not have a right to use your speech to engage in criminal conspiracy, okay? Every act of fraud or conspiracy involves speech of some kind, either written or verbal. That's how the conspiracy occurs. Your free speech rights are not absolute. You do not have a constitutionally protected right to use your mouth or your hand or fingers to communicate to others to engage in a criminal conspiracy. That is strictly forbidden by the Constitution and the law. So anyway, this sort of rhetoric is really disgusting from Fox News, and I imagine it's not going to end anytime soon. So when you see it, make sure you make fun of it.